welcome back to my channel and welcome to another episode of Spells and Specialists, the show where we use magic and stories to teach technical topics and communicate science. All the fun stuff in one very succinct little tagline, I suppose. And I'm super excited today to, of course, welcome back my co-host, Clark Rowenson. Hi, Clark.
Hey, so I am C.R. Rowenson. I'll just call me Clark. You can find me over on the Magic Engineer YouTube channel, where you will actually find parts 2 and 3 of these series, where we take everything we learn in part 1 and identify a magic system seed crystal and fill out the magic system blueprint before we move on to the narrative shenanigans. So yeah.
Exactly. But I mean, parts 2 and 3 don't make any sense unless you've watched part 1, where we get to learn lots of cool stuff from our guest. And today we do have a very special guest on the show. We have Rachel Rowenson. She is a business intelligence analyst, but we're going to be talking today about some system science. And there's a lot of stuff in there that I don't understand. So we're going to have to start from scratch. But welcome to the show, Rachel.
Hi, glad to be here. So, I am Mrs. Rowenson. I am the dark force behind Clark's evil schemes. In the background, lurking. So, yes, my official job title in my day-to-day life is business intelligence analyst, but that does involve looking at a lot of systems and processes involving people, the actual processes they utilize, as well as the technology, the tools, everything involved in that, in order to elicit answers about the organization as a whole. Before I did that, I was a botanist, and I actually studied ecosystem physiology. So I studied how physiology of plants at the molecular level affects them as a whole across an ecosystem and across time. And we can get into that if you
yes,
that's
please.
what we want to talk about. Yeah, I think that's a lot more Lovis's speed.
It is my speed. It is my speed. You said the words ecosystem and physiology and molecular, so I'm on board. Yes.
Yeah, love those words. Great words.
They are good words. They are good words. Yeah, I mean, I think you've probably heard Clark raving about how well our Spells and Specialists episodes have been going. So I'm not surprised that you wanted to join in the fun, but we are very happy to have you here. And I have to say, I can't right now actually imagine what kind of magic system is going to come out of this. So that's quite exciting.
Yep.
I think that's quite cool because it can go in so many different directions. And I have sometimes when you're like, okay, this person does this, I have an idea of what we could do.
Yep.
Inevitably, it ends up being something else. But in this case, I am fascinated. I don't know where we're going.
Well, and as we get going, we'll probably have to rely on you for a lot of questions, Lovis, because like these kinds of systems and system analysis is something that we talk about a lot in our house, because she does system science stuff, and I'm all about magic systems and project management and those kinds of like tweaking and internal management of systems, where she's really about like identifying solutions and information from them. So we talk about this a lot. So
Okay, well, I don't know even where to start. So
well, I guess let's start with what is system science and what is a system scientist?
So it's a very generic, actually very, very generic term, like engineer or scientist. So that it doesn't make it very more specific than that. The Wikipedia definition literally is like someone who analyzes systems in any array of subject matters or subjects. So it can be engineering, it can be mechanical systems, it can be biological, chemical, anything that has more than one part that you're looking at, basically, and how it interacts inside of whatever you're looking at. So the human body, for example, is a system in and of itself. So, but specialists, like a doctor who specializes in, say, the skeleton. Osteo doctor, I believe. What's the term?
That's the technical term. Yes.
Yeah, the technical term. An osteo doctor.
An osteo doctor.
So doctors who specialize, they really tend to come in and focus on this one specific piece inside of the systems, and they're very, very like they go down to such a deep level inside those pieces that sometimes it's hard to connect the whole human body system. So there are other medical professionals that really focus on how all the different pieces inside the human body interact, and the muscular forces, the biophysics, the biomechanics. So physical therapists, for example, are a lot more system oriented in bodies, whereas your medical doctors who are specialists, say in like neurosurgery, that's a topic. They're really, really, really hyper focused on that brain, right, and nerves, but not necessarily how it, obviously all doctors focus on the whole body as a whole, but specialists really go into hyper specific, whereas a physical therapist is focused on the whole system, how it moves and operates. So that's just one example of kind of a system scientist versus a specialist. So a physical therapist is.
And then what constitutes a system then?
So it's when you have any number of, maybe not seemingly unrelated, but they're different, when you have any number of different factors interacting with each other to produce one overall outcome, right? So keeping on that theme of the human body, if you think about all the things that exist inside us, so our bones are a very different structure from our muscles, which is a very different structure from our nerves, very different structure from our skin, right? All of that. So all those structures are really, really, really different. They're composed of different elements, different molecules, different structures, like they perform different things, but they operate as a unit in a system, so that ultimately you create one human being that's moving forward, say, let's say in a runner. That's a system is, like I said, any number of really kind of different things that are interacting with each other to produce some outcome.
And I guess generally, I mean, like you said, specialists look at a very specific part, but it is important to look at the system on a whole, because nothing really works on its own. I imagine it receives signals, or it sends signals, or it's moved by or moves something else. And I mean, that's I'm now thinking of body and bones and muscles and things, but in an ecosystem, it's almost impossible to look at something. Nothing exists in a void, right? It's almost impossible to look at any species or even a single organism without thinking about its environment, or what it eats, or what eats it, or like what medium it lives in. Is it aquatic? Does it fly? Where does it live? And all of these things. So thinking about, it's called an ecosystem. So it's everything together. But how do you, as a system specialist, how does that not overwhelm you? Because people are specialists because there's already a lot to know about one specific thing, whereas you have to kind of, do you have like a surface level knowledge of everything, or do you know everything about everything? Like,
No, definitely not.
Or do you just manage the specialists and like pull the strings?
Yeah, a little bit of 1 and 3 there. So
okay.
I definitely don't know everything. And there is a certain level of technical that we get to where I'm just like, I'm out. This is too much.
You're now in the specialists
area now
of expertise.
And I am checking out. So yeah, so it's very much, I need to have a broad view of a lot of different topics, how they all interact. When I first come into a system, I think I annoy people because I'm asking about things that to them seem like, why are you even asking about this? Why does this matter? This is not your business. I've been told literally this week already to stay in my lane. I don't have a lane. It's the whole thing. So
I hate that phrase so much. Stay in your lane. It's so patronizing. I can't deal with it. I hate it.
Well, and then that just makes me want to get in your lane even more. I'm like, what's in there? That's so interesting.
Yeah. What are you hiding in your lane?
Stuff in your lane.
Is something broken? Sounds like something's broken back there.
Something is broken that you do not want me to see. I'm going to get right up in your lane.
Get right up in there. So yeah, that's the first thing. So when I come into a new system, I am just asking about everything I can think of that might be influencing how it's operating in there. And that in it like that, I'm just a naturally kind of curious person. So I don't know if I ever evolved out of that 3-year-old toddler phase of going, why?
She has
So I
not,
think
no.
that
Clark, no.
yeah. So I think that in and of itself makes me like more suited to thinking at that level, is I'm just constantly asking questions and I'm constantly curious about a lot of different things. I get really bored if I stay in one area for too long. So long story short, I have a broad knowledge of things. And then yes, I call in my specialists when it's time for like the nitty gritty work to get done. You always want to work in tandem, right? There is no one set of skills that's the penultimate, or anything like that. You have to work. Even your teams or systems.
How far can you go down? Is it just a
Yeah.
fractal that everything is broken down into further systems?
I mean, yes. All the way
So
down to cells.
Yeah.
this is interesting. I hadn't actually thought of it this way, but our previous three people have been specialists, right? That, and that's part of the title. So it's been a very specific topic that they have,
It's true. It's part of our
which
title.
Oh no.
um, actually, as I think about it now, makes the system sciences and system scientists particularly interesting, because the broad base of knowledge that you have as a system scientist can vary greatly between system scientists. So, like, you're a system scientist for a lot of more of this business analytical kind of team processing side, um, whereas you could very easily have more system scientists for health and physiology or for manufacturing and chemical plants. And that, I don't know,
Okay.
that is interesting to me. The fact that it is like it's the same role, but the characteristics, the technical characteristics and skills of those people can still be radically different.
Yeah, it's true. How broad do you go? How much how much is excluded from the system? You can go from brain to body, but body to family and family to society, and suddenly we're talking to Corey again about family therapy.
Yep.
Which she would kind of be a systems scientist, wouldn't she?
Sounds like we all are to a certain extent.
Yeah, to a
Um,
Yeah,
certain
and then
extent we all are. I like it.
yeah.
I like it. At what point are you brought onto a project? Does it like start with you and then you call in specialists like you mentioned before, or
I'm going to
does it
caveat.
sometimes go the other way around?
I-
Huh?
I'm just going to caveat that question a little bit to say, when should you be brought in on a project? Because when she should be brought in on a
Haha.
project and when they actually bring her in on a project are two separate things.
I see. I see. I can tell that you've had this conversation before.
Yep.
So ideally you have a systems thinker. I guess you can like um sum it up with that, but you should have someone who kind of thinks that way from the very beginning, because they can oftentimes see where pitfalls are. Systems thinkers tend to look at history as well. So, what have we tried before? Why did it fail? If it did fail, uh, were we just missing technology that we could now implement that would make it work? Things like that. Um, so, yeah, ideally, you would be brought in at the start of some work, but that is a utopia I've never lived in. So, um, so oftentimes we're dropped, these sort of systems thinkers are dropped into something that's already ongoing. They've already hit a lot of walls. Uh, Things aren't working, or they're set up in such a way that you can't actually extract the value that you want from them. So when I focus a lot primarily on data, and I've received a lot of spreadsheets, right? So they call me in. Initially, I came in really as a data analyst. So data analysts come in more towards the end of a whole business process, right? So you have to gather the data and transport it and clean it and have your technical SMEs and all that go through the data process. And then the data analyst gets a hold of that after all that. But a lot of times I get a hold of a data set and I'm like, we got to fix the process like that brought me this data, this is the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. So it's one of those things where it's like, if you want to extract the value from this data, i.e. answer the questions you're trying to answer with this data, we have to go back to the beginning, go back to the process, revamp that process. So a lot of times, so I'm still kind of coming up in my career. I guess I'm more of a journeyman, mid-level type thing. But because I've been kind of at the early cusp of my career, being a systems thinker is not for entry-level people. Generally speaking, you're not really going to be listened to or heard or respected initially. People tend to become more system thinky. That's the technical term. But they tend to think more in systems as they age. There's actually a really great book that talks about this that I am just losing the title of, but it's our brains literally do change as we age, and they become more system oriented as they get older, which is why managers tend to be older and they move into that sort of system realm where they're looking at many things. So unfortunately, if you're a young system thinker, trying to get your foot in the door in those conversations can be difficult. But I've obviously gotten where I am today, and I'm being brought in on these conversations. So yeah, ideally at the beginning of the process, but a lot of times I'm stuck, dropped, in the middle of a war zone, and we got to figure out what we can change, what can easily be leveraged, things like that.
I am already jumping to part 4 of this episode. I can run with a journeyman who is on the early cusp of their career and not respected and dropped into a project that's not working. I could run with that.
The worst.
Yep.
It's going in my character column for part 4.
And that's where we end up commiserating a lot, because I'm a project manager, and that also tends to be very similar, where they drop you in something that has been going for a while and everything is all messed up, and they're like, hey, project manage our way out of this. I'm like, you
wave your project manager wand.
Yeah, you built a house with two wonky load-bearing walls, and you're now telling me to blueprint our way out of this. We need to burn it down and start over. Sorry.
Oh,
Which
well,
they
I
never
can
let
see
you
how
do.
this works now. I can see how this works.
Yeah.
And you will never make that mistake as a project manager to bring in a systems analyst too late into the project.
I'll do my best not to, no. I do actually want to talk a little bit about specifically what you do as a system scientist, Rachel. Like, there's obviously so many different types of scientists. You say you primarily work with data. Like, what kind of stuff, what are the most important parts of you doing your job, and what are some of the more technical either patterns or algorithms or methods that you have to deal with regularly as part of the analysis type stuff you do?
Yeah, so what I run into a lot, and I'm a problem solver and I like to solve problems for not just myself, but for everybody else. Restorative. So
Ooh, I hear some strengths, some Clifton strengths in there.
So yeah, restorative is one of mine. And so I was brought on initially to do analysis, right? Or even data science. So even going into machine learning and neural networks and things like that. But what I found time and time again was I go to do this really cool stuff and I just get hamstrung by all the stuff that preceded it. I can't get a hold of my data. My IT doesn't work. My tools don't work. I have access to no data SMEs. I don't know what any of this data means. I can't hope to understand how to even extract value from it when I don't know what it means. So for me, I was given this task of like, okay, do analysis, write an algorithm. But I found myself really gravitating towards fixing all the stuff that came before the data got to me, because so I now find myself oftentimes I want to be the enabler of your specialists like data scientists and AI programmers, things like that. So I'm often focusing, instead of on that cool shiny end, I'm focusing on the tedious business stuff of how do we develop data processes that, and it's kind of hard to explain if you're not in the realm of data. People who are in data totally understand, but even just starting with how do we develop a workforce that understands that you can't just be changing the field names on your datas. Like you just stop.
I mean, I'm not in data analysis, but even I know that is no bueno.
Yeah.
Because I analyze data as part of my job, and if I get
You
and
understand.
it's so common that you'll get a data set and it is the messiest thing you've ever seen, and you spend so long trying to get it into a format that you could even work with. So actually I know exactly what you're talking about.
Exactly.
Because
Yeah. Okay.
loads of people will have collected data from the field, but they'll have collected different like environmental factors, or they'll have called it different things, or they won't have
Oh
put
yeah.
it in the right column. And yeah, I've had friends who've lost months just
Right.
cleaning data. Cleaning
Yep.
data is like a big step. So
Right.
I empathize.
Right.
Um,
And really, in a really simple analogy, if you were trying to create a database and an archive of hundreds of different books to compare plot structure, character design, and that kind of stuff, and you're doing it in a matrix, right, where you're mapping out, here's the thing, here's where it starts, here's where it ends. It can be as simple as somebody has gone through all of the books, and the heading column titles they have been using have been plot structure and character development, and then they do beginning, middle, and end. And you're working with the team, so multiple people are doing this analysis, which will then bring them all together and compile them into one document. But some of the people are doing story structure and character development, and others are doing plot and character arc.
mhm.
Just by changing the heading title, those won't merge properly anymore.
They won't merge.
It won't
And
merge.
and then you have to spend hours going through all of these potentially hundreds of files, making it just so that the
By
headings match up.
hand.
And
Yes.
that's just if you change the heading titles, right? Like,
Yeah, that's just the tip of that particular
yep,
iceberg.
yep.
Before we move on, you threw out some lingo in there that I think not everybody is familiar with. And I know from experience that these are not easy topics to summarize, but I'm going to put you on the spot. You mentioned machine learning.
Right.
What is machine learning?
What is machine learning?
What is
So
AI? What
machine
does it mean to be aware?
Yeah.
Well, we don't
We
even
need
have
to
to go that
decide.
far for machine learning.
uh, so machine learning is basically advanced applied statistics, but it's they use reinforcement models where you write an algorithm, and there's a lot of different models and a lot of different algorithms out there, but you write an algorithm that looks at a set of data, and then when it actually spits it out, it's like charts, right? So it learns a particular trend inside a chart. So let's say you're looking at a histogram, right? And the trend is like leaning to the left, right? So your algorithm for its first round through, it says, okay, it's leaning to the left. And then you keep feeding it things, basically, and it will adjust that chart.
Yeah, so I am C.R. Rowenson. I'll just call me Clark. You can find me over on the Magic
That's
Engineer
kind of a
YouTube
layman's
channel,
term of how to
where
summarize it.
you will
It's
actually
just
find
advanced
parts
statistics,
2 and
basically.
3
It's not
of these
like,
series, where
and it's
we
certainly
take
not a
everything
silver
we learn in
bullet, and it's
part
certainly
1
not going to solve your problems, and
and
it really can't work if your
identify a
data is
magic
bad.
system seed
Just
crystal
period. If your
No.
and
data
fill out the
and your
magic
IT
system
is
blueprint
bad, you
before we move
cannot
on
do
to the
machine
narrative
learning with AI.
shenanigans. So yeah.
So there's probably a better definition.
I think that was pretty good. I think that was pretty good. We don't need to delve into it. I just didn't want viewers to get lost with words. The other one was neural networks, but that is kind of just a way of doing really complicated machine learning, isn't
It is, and
it?
it's specifically meant to mimic the way that neurons
Yeah.
talk with each other in the human brain. So I have opinions on neural networks. I'm like, why are you busy doing neural network stuff when you have all these 7 billion human brains already walking around? Let's put them to work. Sounds terrible, but for me, I feel AI has really great potential for removing all of the tedious, mind-numbing, error-prone, repetitive sort of tasks that human beings have to do, so that we can move on to the critical thinking.
And
And
that
neural networks
Yeah.
are interesting, but
Yeah.
And because I was doing a bunch of brainstorming for this with Rachel before, I know what some of this is, and I think this is a great segue that I completely ruined. But this is a good time to transition into some of the take-home lessons, primarily because you mentioned silver bullets. So, what are some of the take-home lessons that, as we go through building the magic system and constructing this high-level narrative arc, what are some of the lessons that we want to teach? What is it you want people to come away um, understanding or learning?
So one of the main ones is like culturally, we focus a lot on individuals and the individual person, the hero, the solution, just go into the center of the ship and turn off the radiator and everything will be fine. So a lot of story structure and just culturally, we have these stories that have a silver bullet, whether that's a person, some sort of tech entrepreneur, one solution to fix the whole story arc, right, and save the day. And to me, like that's not in the real world. I've never found a silver bullet that solved the problem. And I've never solved a problem by myself. It's always been with a team of people. It's always been inside of a system, inside of an organism, a business organism, I guess you'd call it, and even academic. No one has ever accomplished anything by themselves, and there is no silver bullet to solving systemic problems. So that's one of the first lessons, is just that solutions that last are systemic in scope and are often time and heart intensive. And what I mean by heart intensive is they require commitment and enthusiasm and hope. And you have to keep that going over time, like a burning flame in your heart. That's why systemic solutions often end up stalling or failing, because, we change political landscape, or we change business landscape, we change leaders, we change this and that. And it can be very difficult to implement systemic solutions, which is why we're always looking for silver bullets. But to me, I've never seen a silver bullet that worked. And so I'm very suspicious of people who sell that or try and convince you that this one thing will change everything and it will save the day. So that's the first lesson, is there are no silver bullets, and solutions that last are systemic. The other thing is that you and everything you interact with is woven into systems of systems. And you do not exist in a vacuum. You don't just exist in your own little world and interacting with stuff. Like, you are woven into your body, your family, your society, your world, your ecology. Like, humans aren't separate from the world. We're part of it. And you can't remove yourself from those systems. Even if you move far, far away and you don't talk to anybody, you can't remove yourself from these systems. So we have to be thinking about, you can't just, if you mess up this planet, you can't just shoot off and go to a new planet, because you haven't solved the problems, right, that caused you to harm this one in the first place. So there's that. So there are no silver bullets. You exist in a system and you can't escape. Very dire, but it's good in the end, I promise. And then the things you do affect the system. So systems are affected by tiny changes over time. So Atomic Habits talks about this, about how if you do something small, but many times every day, that builds up. And that's how systems operate. So you matter, I think, is the main thing, right? And the tiny things that you do on a daily basis affect the system, and they will eventually manifest for good or for bad. So if you're doing tiny bad habits every day, that will manifest. But if you're doing tiny good habits, that will also manifest as goodness. So those are the three main things.
Okay.
It's
We went on quite a roller coaster there of like really hopeful and uplifting, and then quite dire and depressing.
This reminds me, there's a Latin proverb that I'm gonna butcher because I haven't studied Latin in like a decade. But it's something along the lines of like the man who travels the ocean to escape his problems will only change the stars. Or like,
yeah, only the stars will change.
yeah, or the only thing that will change will be the stars, because he's
Oh,
gone
I
to the other
see.
side of the planet. The sky has changed, and
Yeah.
that is it. Just when you said like nothing's in a vacuum and you're always part of the system, like even, yeah, yeah, it's to a
There's
certain
no
extent you carry
escape.
them with you. So even if you run off somewhere else, you're carrying those problems with you unless you have learned to not make them problems anymore.
In which case, you don't have to run from anything.
No, we have to stay and fight and solve the problem here.
There you go.
Systemically.
Systemically, which I imagine, I mean, we talk about systemic problems all the time. We talk about systemic racism, we talk about systemic misogyny, we talk about all kinds of systemic problems all the time. And usually we talk about them in a fairly negative way, in that, like, well, they're systemic. It's such a huge hurdle to overcome, because, like you say, you can't fix everything with one solution. You need 1,000 solutions, and you need 1 billion people to do those 1,000 solutions. And so, usually it's the systemic problems that seem the most impossible, because they're usually the biggest, most ingrained. The people that are enforcing it are usually the richest and the most powerful, and you just feel very small in the face of the systemic problems. Maybe not in your daily job with as a systemic problems, not necessarily on the level of society, but whenever I hear systemic problems, I think like impossible odds kind of narrative.
Well, and I'd love to change that too, because it's not impossible. It's just that the solution is that heart investment, right? Heart intensive. It's that the solutions are often very small, but you just have to keep doing them. So, the solution to hate or racism is not like, jail all the Nazis and then we're going to get flagged on YouTube. Jail all the racists.
The extremists. Go with the
The
extremists.
extremists, jail all the extremists, and we've solved it. That's obviously not right, but it's just being you in your day-to-day life, being kind and generous and thoughtful with your words, thinking about, I could be mean in this interaction, but what would be the nice way to get what I want, right? There's just these tiny little things, and if many people do those tiny things, if many people are kind at every opportunity that they have, that starts to build on itself. So that is part of the problem with systemic manifestations, either good or bad, is that they took time to build. So all the good that you see in the world, that took time, and all the bad in the world took time, and it will take time to kind of iron it out. We're not just going to solve these problems overnight, but we do have to have hope that the little things that we're doing each day are actually going to manifest in a better system that we all live in and operate in.
So we've been talking. Sorry, it looked like you had a question, Lovis.
Not a question, a segue, but it sounds like you were on your way to a segue.
Well, we've been talking a lot about, like, as we've transitioned into the lessons, we've been talking a lot about personal actions and behavioral and attitude stuff. How much does that? Why is that one of the lessons you wanted to talk about when you deal with data? Like, how does that relate to your job as dealing with data?
Well, one of the major barriers I always face in getting good data is culture. And often what changes a culture is you have kind of your natural leaders that exist. And a leader isn't necessarily someone who has a title. It's just people who, have a lot of allies. They naturally have a lot of people rooting for them. And they have a strong presence. Those people, if they, start a revolution, I guess you could say, about something, you start bringing in other people, and that can help change an entire culture inside of an organization. So usually these things start with one person, and you just have to find the right person that can help start making those waves, those ripples. And these are a ripple effect, because humans are, we're hypersocial animals. So Jonathan Haidt, I believe, is the author, but in The Righteous Mind, he talks about this, about how humans are hypersocial. So if you get one human to start doing something, and they seem to be having good results, and they're really enthusiastic, and they're invested in their heart, that starts rippling out to other human beings. So that's more what I mean about it's you as an individual aren't going to like change the whole world, but you can create ripples that bring more and more people on board.
You said something before about wanting to also communicate that it's not impossible, that solutions can be small and heart intensive. And that kind of segues nicely into my next question, which is, we now know what you want to communicate, but why do you want to communicate those things? What are you trying to achieve with communicating those things? Are you trying to educate people? Are you trying to change minds? Are you trying to make them not so doom and gloom potentially in certain situations? Yeah, what is it that you're trying to achieve with spreading this kind of knowledge?
I suppose on the more darker preventative side, I've seen, and I think we've all seen, that when we act and scale things without thinking about how that affects the whole system, that can cause some really dire problems that we then now have to create some big systemic solution to get out of. So that's one of the things, is that you should always be very mindful and cautious about how you're interacting with the system, how what you're creating is interacting with the system, not to sort of overwhelm you, but just to be respectful of the world around you and how it exists, right? So human beings, when we invented the internal combustion engine, we were just like, this is dope. Like we weren't thinking about the repercussions of that over time, right? So it's things like that, just being very mindful. There's this really great book called Digital Minimalism, and he talks about not getting rid of all technology in your life. Obviously, we're sitting on a computer, having a great time. But he talks about really focusing on the new things, the technologies that are really genuinely going to bring a benefit to your life, make it better. And I think that we as a society, if we thought about all this new technology, new products, new ways of doing things, if we just took a moment to be like, is this a net benefit? I think we could have stopped a lot of things that have brought us right to where we are, is if we had just taken a moment to ask why. Why?
Why? Why do
Why?
this?
Why? Why do we need this?
So,
Uh,
so it sounds like one of the main goals is to increase awareness of systems and encourage more
yeah,
deliberate behavior.
yeah, just intentional
And it's
thought.
always interesting talking about this stuff because anytime, I think another part of this is like revisiting what you're doing and why you're doing it frequently. Because right now it's really easy to look back at internal combustion engines and everything we've been doing with oil and see the problem. My mom has been a child psychologist and teacher pretty much, yeah, my entire life. And when she first started, part of the lesson plan was that oil was a renewable resource. And that has changed. Information has changed as we have learned new
Yeah.
things, which is why like revisiting those whys and what's frequently, it sounds like, is very important. Because
Yes.
if you thought it was a renewable resource, then yeah, it makes total sense to keep scaling it up um, and all of that. But I'm not going to get too far in that because that can get very political very quickly. But
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I guess you work within the system to the best of your knowledge, I guess,
Yeah.
and to the information that's out there at the time. Um, I mean, those whys and those lessons sound like they could be applicable to pretty much anybody, but
Yeah.
when you think of teaching this, who are you trying to reach? What are they kids? Are they adults? Are they teens? Are you trying to reach a certain group of people, or everybody, which is difficult?
I think obviously, like, adults have the adults are particularly difficult because they have all the power to do things and make change, but they are often a little more set in their ways than a younger audience. Um, I think if we get kids thinking about systems from an early age, how they work together, how they impact, I think that can help just instill that sort of instinct for not looking at one thing in isolation, but seeing the world, how it interacts in all those places. So Yeah, maybe I would focus on teenagers or young adults.
Okay.
I like it. I like it. I can see the story already. I can see it. I could see it. I need to not get too ahead of myself.
Okay, so you've also been talking about like nothing is in a vacuum, everything is woven together. Do you have um this is a bit of a misleading question because I know you have examples. What are some of the examples you have of that to kind of illustrate that point of just even in weird ways, things can be woven together and have these kind of ripple effects through the system. What are some examples?
Yeah, so a couple examples mainly. So you have a lot of people who have this great idea of like, well, society's falling apart. It's not, but they think society's falling apart. So I'm going to move away into the middle of the woods and I'm going to grow all my own food and all that, which is like, that is cool. I want to do that because I love trees and being in them.
Yep, we
But
are absolutely planning on doing that.
yeah, we're going to have a cow. It's going to be great.
And some chickens,
Uh,
probably some goats, because you
yeah,
don't feel
probably
bad
goat.
when you butcher the goats because they're jerks.
Oh
Anyway.
no, this just got dark.
Wow. We went 0 to 60. Is this a particular
My
gripe
bad.
that you have with goats?
Clark has
They
opinions
got the
about
weird
goats. Carry on.
pupils. They're weird. Like,
They are weird.
they're weird. Anyways, no, we're not here to kill goats. Uh, so people have employed this strategy, right? Because they're like, I'm going to get away and I'm going to grow my organic crops and I'm going to no antibiotics in my animals, things like that. So farmers did this in Maine, for example. So they had a whole organic outfit and they were operating in just their small community. They thought they had escaped society and the chemicals and all that, right? Well, they did a test and there's a bunch of PFAS in their cows because the land that their cows were eating from, their grass-fed cows, their grass-fed organic, non-antibiotic cows, the land that they were eating on had 30 years ago had a bunch of stuff dumped all over it.
Oh
And that's
no.
still yeah. So that's a very dark one, right? And that's an example of just our globe right now, like we have to take care of it because there is nowhere you can go that isn't affected by what we have done, right? And what we do on the planet. Alaska, for example, very remote. Most people there are like, very removed from things, but Alaska is being affected by global warming way faster than the rest of America is. So it's stuff like that where you can't run and you can't hide. So
Do you have
it's
any?
very scary sounding, but it's, we have to take responsibility and stay and try and fix these problems. And luckily, that's the hopeful part of the message I'm trying to convey is that oftentimes the solutions are small and simple and just require us to keep going.
Okay.
So
I like
that's
it.
an example, yeah.
Uh, I could ask more questions, but I think are we good on time? I think we're probably
I
we
think
should.
I think that is probably a very good note to wrap things up on. It was a nice, hopeful little peek at the end, and so I think that's a good one to wrap up on. We've got our take-home messages. There are no silver bullets. Is one. You don't have one solution to fix everything. It's usually a systemic change that will fix a problem. The second, everybody is in a system of systems, and you cannot remove yourself from the systems of systems that you're in, and therefore you can't run or escape. So therefore your actions, you need to take action because your actions will build and they will have an effect, as long as you keep doing them and keep making kind of the most positive choice that you can. Or was that the third one? Have I combined two?
That's
Uh,
okay.
yeah.
I think I've
So
combined two.
no
I think
silver,
those last two were separate.
no
Yeah.
silver bullet, and no silver bullets, and it's never done alone.
Yeah.
Nothing exists in a vacuum. Everything is part of a network of systems, not just a single system. And actions, both positive and negative, are cumulative and
Yes. Okay.
affect
Yeah.
the
So
systems
those
they're
are
in.
our three. Those are our three take-home messages, and I think that's a good that's a good point to jump right into the next part of this episode, which is where we come up with a seed crystal, which is our point of inspiration from which we will build a magic system. And that's always a lot of fun. We take all the cool stuff that we've learned in this part of this episode and we kind of distill it down to it's really the core thing that gets us all super excited to build something. And that part and the part after it for the magic system building, you will find on Clark's channel, The Magic Engineer. So make sure you are subscribed to The Magic Engineer so that you don't miss anything. And the part 2 is available now. You can go watch it right now. It's there. It's ready.
And also make sure that you like and subscribe to Ecofictology while you're here.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Because you don't want to miss part 4 because
Exactly.
I can already tell it's going to be amazing. So the only thing left is to thank our guest. Rachel, thank you so much for taking the time to chat to us. And of course, you're not going anywhere right now because we have a seed crystal to find. But for the viewers who might not, make the better decision to follow us directly over to The Magic Engineer, do you have anywhere that you are present on social media, or can people reach out to you or anything like that?
Oh no.
That's only if you want them to.
Yeah, absolutely not a requirement.
They can always reach out to Mr. C.R. Rowenson if they have questions, and he will get them to me.
That is true.
Okay. That's a good way of doing it. That's good. Yeah.
He's gonna be my secretary.
Yep.
You can field the questions. Excellent. Well, I guess that wraps us up. So that's all from us, and we will see you next week.
Thank you.